Hey there. Shame and healing social engagement. What a topic. One that is close to my heart and well known to my innards, my guts, my whole nervous system. Shame is a complex emotion with a simple definition. One definition is that it's a painful emotion caused by consciousness of guilt, shortcoming, or impropriety. For me, the feeling is a kind of queasy, sick, debilitating, paralyzed, self-judging, self-rejecting feeling. And it's awful, and I know it quite well. I've often described myself as a shame baby. In other words, it's a negative emotion that I know well, and where other people have different kinds of issues, maybe severe anxiety or major rage or depression, that's my one. So I know it well, and it's like a kind of a toxic chemical flood in the whole body that numbs, hurts, and paralyzes. And no, it's not a nice feeling at all. And so for any of you who know this feeling, please just say hi via email or in the comments section. Share how this feels for you. It'd be great just to share this conversation some. So shame has some curious characteristics. For one, it often occurs in relation to other humans. In other words, we project the feeling out. What do they think of me, or how do they judge me? But as with most bad feelings, the parts that are arising are usually trying to resolve negative situations or developmental wounding. You could say the part that is triggering is trying to create a positive outcome, which is that it's really essentially trying to help define what are seen as positive choices or create boundaries around what is morally or socially right for us. It is trying to get us to heal. This is certainly true for me, but it can really be the result of deep trauma, and so shame can have been in our makeup for as long as we remember being alive, and we'll have no memory of how it got there for some of us. So in other words, we're going to have regular upwellings of this feeling that are based on traumas that one doesn't even remember. And that's perplexing. And it's like there's a node or a schema or this kind of conglomeration of core trauma or traumas lurking somewhere inside us, unseen, unhealed, unmet. And then that original wounding then projects out onto the life that we're living right now. So there's an element of hiding in it too. So on the one hand, that schema or that original wound might be hiding inside us. So that original developmental trauma very often hides from us, lurking deep inside. And so we form protective layers or parts or stories over it in order to cope with everyday life. For some, these original traumas perhaps happened before we have memories, so they remain seemingly impenetrable, unfindable, lost in the mist of our youngest years. But the weird thing is that this hiding can continue into our adult life. So when we carry shame, we often want to hide from the collective or from the group. And with shame, we might even want to hide the fact that we're feeling shame. And usually with shame, there's a sense of comparing ourselves and one's actions with our standards and not meeting them, but also potentially being judged by the collective or some kind of ideal behavior, and always found wanting. The essence of it is self-punishment, and while it often contains truth, acknowledgement of wrongdoing or poor behavior, it is also often creating fictional stories inside us that lead to a sense of worthlessness, powerlessness, and self-loathing, and feeling small, exposed, and wanting to hide. And from an evolutionary point of view, the emotion can be useful to help the tribe, if you like, to stay together and to condition tribe members to behave according to generally accepted rules. So when one tribe member goes out of line, it can feel mortally wounding to be shamed, as if our survival depends on being acceptable to the tribe. And in some cases, this is probably good and is good. And in other cases, some of this conditioning is just crazy. And the real history inside us is that originally we have been shamed and hurt by others, often caregivers in early life. But rather than pointing fingers at them or the collective, this shame turns inwards. We take on the shaming done to us and then shame ourselves. And a finer detail is that often there's an internal, so inside us, an internal imagined audience out there that are judging us and rejecting us. So we might imagine influential family members, friends, or people we know in our working or social communities speaking about us, judging us, thinking less of us, and rejecting us. And from an academic point of view, shame is seen as a really powerful emotion that can make us feel defective or unacceptable, even damaged beyond repair. One of the phrases that can appear is that I am broken. Let's take a deep breath. Wow, this is some really light, easy, fun material, isn't it? And so, just to be clear on the difference between guilt and shame. With shame, it's like your whole life, your whole self rather, is wrong. But if you're feeling guilty, it's probably just about a single one behavior or thing you did or said. It's interesting to note that the research is beginning to show that shame also affects men and women differently. It's said that men with shame-based low self-esteem tend to act out through anger or violent behavior towards other, or actually just to act out in any kind of way that relates to their original trauma, where women tend to more often act in by turning the feelings inwards, hating themselves and being self-destructive. So women are much more likely to turn self-loathing in on their own bodies. So in my work around self-expression, shame is a huge factor in shutting down voices, and I think it really contributes to a sense of social anxiety. Because as soon as there is shame, there is an accompanying dysregulation in the social engagement nervous system of the person. So technically speaking, there's some kind of dysregulation in the ventral vagal nervous system, which, amongst other things, governs the feeling of safety around other humans. And from a neurophysiological point of view, an ideal state for us is to be in our ventral vagal nervous system, this highly evolved nervous system. And the accompanying feelings that include this are the ones that we all want to feel. So being in our ventral vagal nervous system includes these feelings of safety and compassion and connection and trust with other human beings. And when it gets dysregulated and disrupted, it's very difficult for us to come home, especially around each other. So the social engagement system is seen as one of our highest nervous system states, and it can be one of our most elusive if we carry trauma inside us. And there's a horrible irony with shame. Being interconnected makes us feel safe, and our shame makes us retreat and hide and disconnect from others. So shame perpetuates isolation and unsafety. It's a setup for pain, for perpetuating itself and the accompanying feelings of being judged or outcast or less than or too much. Let's take another deep breath. And the internal shaming we feel frequently operates in one of two ways. It can either just be, I'm horrible, I'm terrible, so the self pointing at the self, if you like, but it can also frequently play outside of us, or play outside inside of us. So, in other words, it plays out through other people's eyes, but inside us. I'll explain what I mean. So we kind of externalize the judgment to them. They don't like me. They think I'm an awful person. And that's a kind of a way of at least projecting it out, get the horrible feeling out. But the horrible feeling is still actually happening inside us, but it's perhaps less owned because the truth is, this is how we feel about ourselves. For those that externalize it into a feeling like they don't like me, one of the routes towards healing is really beginning to acknowledge that it's actually parts inside me that feel this way. And sort of fully meet as best as we can to meet and acknowledge the feelings and parts instead of avoiding them. And if we can go back and find the original wounding or conditioning where we actually took on this negative perception of self, then healing can potentially take place. For heavy-duty shame, I recommend getting help. Yeah, just to repeat what the feeling of shame for me is like and many others. It's like a paralyzed, queasy, numb, horrible feeling, really low. And it also feels depressive, self-judging, self-doubting, and self-loathing. And technically you could say it's often accompanied by a parasympathetic freeze state in the nervous system. It's like a really dead, numb state. And the body may be full of numbing opioids, and sometimes even at the same time can be full of adrenaline. So kind of both numbing and adrenalized and in fear at the same time. And when we're like this, it can really result in a kind of overriding feeling of I can't, and shut down, and I can't do anything, and I don't want to go out, and I don't want to be seen, and I definitely don't want to speak, and I definitely don't want to be seen on the internet, online. And so it's super not fun. And if you regularly feel like this, my heart is with you. Hey, and if you don't feel like this, be kind to people who do. You may not even know that they're feeling it, but just having an open heart towards it is good. As with all nervous system states and conditioned states, with a little help we can heal and self-regulate back towards social engagement. I personally like tools like TRE, tapping, and seeing a quality therapist. Singing in a group is also an enormously curing way to just heal the social engagement system and move some kind of energy through the body and get to the point of it being okay with other humans. But if you're struggling to make it out of the house, then doing some TRE, doing some tapping, and then reaching out to a trusted healer or therapist is a good idea. And with the latter, in a safe therapy container, the opportunity is just to talk about it, which switches on the social engagement nervous system and gives us an opportunity to safely express and explore and let out the shame. And then through the connection and safe container of the therapy sessions, we can gradually begin to work through the deeper wounds at play here. And as I've said before, and will say it again, weekly one-on-ones may be needed for a year or years to get through and into the deep wounds or schemas and to release what lies stuck there. And it's, excuse me, and it's good if the therapist has trauma releasing tools. And shame comes in so many forms. But an example might be shame about our bodies, where we picture other people rejecting us or imagining our partners rejecting us, judging or leaving us. Of course, for the most part, it's just our own self-perception. And as we know, we also learn these self-perceptions from our culture. So you could say shame is usually the result of both old, original developmental trauma and also layers of cultural conditioning about how I should be and how I should behave. Another example might be for children who receive very strong conditioning and messages from their parents about keeping their mouth shut and being seen and not heard. As adults, being in social gatherings can be very triggering and can feel like a tug of war between shut down, silenced, and socially anxious parts, and other parts of ourselves that want to be seen, accepted, and express themselves freely. And frequently when there is subtle or gross abuse trauma in the mix, there is shame attached to our voices. And in situations like these, shame will be pouring through our body. But we're so used to it, so we might put a mask on and pretend everything is fine, while at the same time Armageddon is happening down below. And so personally for me, I think it's part of our life's work to decondition ourselves from these wounds, thoughts, and belief systems. And with our voices, we can start at the behavioral level, sure, learning to find safety speaking and expressing ourselves. And as an aside, the online world is an interesting place to begin to find freedom expressing ourselves beyond shame. It's very curious to me, having watched my own and others' behavior online, how clearly shame plays such a big role in online behavior, and whether it's safe to have a voice and be ourselves online. And it might express as a fear of posting and expressing ourselves and being our quirky, unique selves. Because if we let ourselves loose even a little bit, a chorus of judgment takes place inside before posting even, and then gets worse after posting. We can be filled with regret. So even at a subtle level, we can feel shame and regret and close down and wish we hadn't done that. And then some of us delete our posts. And so looking at one's online behavior is a great way to get a sense for how much shame is sitting in one's nervous system, in one's social regulation system, and in terms of being interpersonally connected and feeling safe just to be who we are, to let other people see us in our faulty humanity. So if we do see that, it's then worth doing the work to begin to decondition that fear and shame. Perhaps to actually say, I give myself permission to have a voice. Maybe even, actually, I don't give a damn what they think. Actually, it's more important for me to speak and begin to have a voice than it is for me to hide. Actually, I've got gifts I want to share with the world. So shame has a direct effect on our sense of personal power in the world. In other words, the ability to say, this is who I am, and this is what I do, and this is what I stand for. And I must also add that one's sense of playfulness and fun can also be totally shut down in this shamed, bound up conditioning and trauma patterning. So, if any of this rings true for you, let's get busy. Let's do the work of overcoming painful long-term shaming patterns and being overwhelmed by this emotion. Let's get unshamed and have some more fun and express ourselves more powerfully in the world and express our gifts and let other people see us. I think one of the things about shame is it makes one hide one's humanity and try and be perfect. And I think I keep learning more and more about just showing up and letting the world see me as I am and letting myself just be the person who's actually sitting here in my, we call it tracksuit in South Africa, in my sweatpants and slippers and my covered hair, in the shirt I wore, well, in the sweat top I wore yesterday. Anyway, I'm just practicing. So I hope you enjoyed this and found it interesting, and just let me know how this felt for you and if it touched you. It certainly stirred a lot of things inside as I wrote it. So there's a comment section on YouTube, or if you got this on email, please just take the time, just pop me an email to say you watched this and if it touched you in some way. And just to say there are more videos, you can click on the links either side if you're interested in knowing more about liberating self-expression in this series. So right here. Thank you so much for watching.